After Americans declared independence in 1776 all the way to 1781, they did not have a formal government. They had a Continental Congress, but didn't have a constitution. Now, the Continental Congress did have a president. That's John Hanson. So technically, John Hanson is the first president of the United States. But it's not under the Constitution under which we abide today. Now, not to have a written constitution is not that weird. The British didn't have a written constitution, and the Americans modeled themselves after Britain. But Britain has a constitution embedded in a series of other documents, like their laws, the Magna Carta, other statutes that have developed over hundreds of years. So they can't really adopt the British system wholesale. They really need something of their own. So they decided in 1781 to write a constitution, and that is the Articles of Confederation, written in 1781, and that is during the war. The Articles of Confederation were actually written in 1776, right after Declaration of Independence, but they were unable to get everyone to ratify it during the process of the war. So it doesn't get ratified until 1781, so it doesn't go into place until 1781. But they sort of operated under its dictates during the war, right? Now, at the same time, each state is writing their own constitution. So the state and federal constitutions during the war have a few things in common, but they're also kind of independent. Now, both sets of constitutions especially turn to the idea that the power rests in the people, that the people are in charge of the government rather than a monarchy. And of course, when they mean people, they mean free white men. Now, the Articles of Confederation are actually a weak form of government. It's considered a confederation rather than a nation. A nation is where there's one main source of power, like a monarchy. A confederation is the main source of power remains in the states, where it's sort of spread out between multiple entities. And the Articles of Confederation actually just coordinates the states together. There is, in fact, no central government. There is a president who acts like a moderator between each of the states. And they call this new country the United States of America. And that's the idea. It's not a nation, right? It's not the American nation. It's United States, that is multiple in this place of America. Now, in the Confederation, there's one vote per state, and that each state comes together for a few things like conducting foreign relations and declaring war. So it's pretty strong in states' rights, and it leaves a very weak executive, right? So the executive is just committees. There's one body, so it's a unicameral legislature, and each of the representatives are represented by states, right? So there's a very weak federal power and very strong state power. Now, there are some concerns about the Articles of Confederation. One, the problem is that each state is represented equally, and this is bad in some way for big states, because each person is in a big state means that each person has less of a vote than someone in a small state, right? If you only have one vote for Rhode Island and one vote for North Carolina, that means that each person in Rhode Island has a bigger voice for that one representative. So this illustrates a standard problem between big states and little states. Little states fear that big states will dominate them. They have more people, they have more money, and big states fear that little states will take an unnatural advantage, right? There's fewer people, more likely to come up with crazy ideas. Right? So the powers of the central government are very limited, and it's not enough power to deal with the issues that arise in the 1780s. One of the biggest problems that comes up out of the Articles of Confederation is that the federal government doesn't have the right to tax, right? This is one of the reasons why Americans rebelled in the first place. So the federal government cannot tax, which means that there's no money, right, in the federal government. So the federal government has to ask the states to give them money. And the states have their own debt, so they don't want to tax either, right? They just fought a war for this. So the federal government doesn't have any money, and they can't afford a military, and they've just sold their navy to France. They've just reduced their army, and they can barely handle the forts that they have, right? So when Spain closes the Mississippi River trade and says, Americans, you can't trade on the Mississippi River, America can't do anything about it, right? And so they quickly realize, the Continental Congress realizes that the government needs to be stronger. How can they be a strong nation if they don't have the money to sort of have a military, have a navy, and sort of enforce some of the things that they want to do? So in 1787, Alexander Hamilton calls the Constitutional Convention to amend the Articles of Confederation, which is a completely illegal thing to do. I'll talk about that next.